right, welcome back to the Two Stewards Show. I'm Brent Vanderwood, and this is
Mark Krikke from Joyhill Property Management.
And we are back to talk a little bit about what Mark and his wife, Kirsten, do for a living. And their company's called, as he mentioned, Joyhill Property Management. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys do? And you're in the Airbnb space.
Yeah, for sure. So, we provide property management. We're in the Hamilton, Ontario area, and our specialty is short and midterm rentals. We also do long-term rentals, but the stuff we really enjoy is short and midterm. So, people talk about Airbnb, and that's almost kind of like a verb or a thing unto itself. But generally,
Google it.
Airbnb it. So, really, usually when we say Airbnb, we mean short-term rental. But that's what we do.
So what does short-term rental, what makes something a short-term rental versus what, midterm, long-term?
Yeah, so long-term rentals everybody's kind of familiar with. I know you are. And that's where you would sign a year lease with somebody, with a tenant, right? And they commit to staying it for a year, and usually that'll turn into multiple years. So once Airbnb came on the scene, they really introduced short-term rentals as a new market segment. They did kind of exist in various forms, but not to the extent that it does now, where especially residential real estate is being used for short-term rentals. So when we say short-term, that's 30 days or less. That's kind of the generally accepted term. And then midterm is kind of a newer thing again, and that would be 30 days or more. So is someone staying for at least a month, but less than a year. And there's different market target markets for short and midterm, but that's sort of short term in a nutshell.
Right. So your business is a property management business. So what types of properties do you guys focus on, and how do you approach property management? So you're not renting long-term, signing a lease agreement. You're going through some of these platforms, like you mentioned, Airbnb being one of the platforms. So could you just explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So we normally will, when somebody approaches us, like a client, we'll talk about their objectives and what they're looking to do. And then that kind of informs the decision as to whether it should be a long-term or short-term or midterm rental. And, what the allowable rules in the area are as well. So a lot of the time people will kind of have their minds made up when they come to us. So we don't usually have to sell them on either the short term or the long term.
Or somebody who buys a property.
It would be someone who has a property, and either they've just acquired it or they've just built it, and they're looking at doing something with it. Right. So usually people kind of know, like, yep, I just want this to be a long-term rental, or I want it to be a short-term rental. But we usually do an exercise where we sit down and kind of, again, go over their objectives. Because once you actually spell out what you're looking to do with this piece of real estate, often that, informs the action you're going to take with it, kind of similar to what you guys will do with clients. Sit down, and there's a lot of pre-planning you need to do before you actually get into setting the place up or using it as that type of rental. So
pre-planning, before planning.
Yeah, that's exactly. You get regular planning and you get your pre-planning. So there's actually a lot to think about, right? And if you're interested in long-term equity, minimal effort, maybe long-term is the way to go if you don't mind putting a little more effort into it. Or a lot of effort into it, then we can look at short and midterm options. And so our focus is property management. We do also work with people who are going to be their own managers and just get their units set up for them. And that's usually on the short-term side. But we provide full-service property management. And when you're dealing with short-term rentals, there's sort of two aspects to that. One is the property management. So that's just like us making sure the property doesn't fall into disrepair. And, so if there's minor repairs to be done or major repairs, we either do them or organize them. And that's, property management. People kind of understand that, right? And finding tenants and making sure the place is in good shape. The other side of it is would be co-hosting or the hosting aspect of it. So that's when you're dealing with Airbnb and some of these other platforms. Like there's an art to that. There's a business to it. How do you actually do that to be successful on Airbnb? And that's where we come in to do that. So somebody, we prefer where a client would just kind of hand us the keys and be like, here's the property. We've discussed what we're doing with it, but here you go. Take care of it for me and just send me money every month, please. Right. And then we can kind of go from there. Some people want to be a little more hands-on, and that's fine. But typically, we'll make sure that the property is in good shape. And so we don't really get into the construction side of things like you do, but we'll work hand in hand with the client to make sure that it gets up to speed for the use that it's intended for. And then, and then on the short-term side, then we get the unit.
Before you go into that sort of thing, so you're not in the construction side of things, but if I have a property and I want to do midterm or short-term, is there specific things that I should think about when I'm renovating or setting this up? Like before I call you, or I call you and you tell me?
Before you do it, call us, I guess, would be my thing, right? Because, there's a lot to think about, similar to what you've talked about in previous episodes. We always want to have a plan B when we're dealing with a client. So they may be interested in short-term rentals, and I have some good examples of this for you as well. They may just no, we're sick of doing long-term. We want to do short-term rentals. So, that's fine. Let's think about this. But if you can't use your place as a short-term rental, and especially if you're buying a property from scratch, right? This informs, again, what you're going to buy. So if it doesn't work as a short-term rental, could it work as a midterm rental? If it doesn't work as a midterm rental, could it work as a long-term rental? So that's always our fallback, is we want a place that could be used as a long-term rental. And that would hold value one way or another. So usually what that means, especially in an urban environment, is like a starter home. So starter homes are kind of unique in that there's generally demand for them, right? So if the economy is booming and things are going well and lots of people are upwardly mobile, people may be moving from an apartment of some kind and buying their first home. Well, what is that first home going to be? It's going to be a starter home. So there's a lot of demand for that. Investors as well, we've seen, have really been competing with first-time home buyers for starter homes. So when things are busy, there's lots of demand for that. On the flip side, if the economy is in a downturn, people need to downsize. Like the homes that are going to be sold first generally are going to be the more expensive homes that are harder to keep up and cost more. And if people are downsizing, where are they going to go? They're going to go at the bottom end of ownership anyways to a starter home, right? It may be that they need to go right down to renting.
Category of housing that you kind of advise people to look at and shop around if you're going to be buying a property specific for short-term, midterm rentals. Yeah.
Yeah, and there will be exceptions, right? You may have more sophisticated investors or people with portfolios already where they're just going to buy specifically a vacation rental, like a cottage or something. Yeah. And then they just need to understand the risk associated with that it's going to be cyclical. You can certainly make good money with them, but understand, it can be seasonal. If there's a downturn, you may be stuck holding that property with no recourse either to rent it out or to sell it, because that's the other option too. If you had to sell your real estate holdings, could you sell it? So a starter home, there's always demand for it either as a rental or if you had to sell it.
Okay, so we got the house. We're happy with the purchase that we made. Now we want to actually get you guys in to do it. What kind of services, what's the next step kind of thing?
So even before that, we will still look at the house with clients and just kind of, just to have an idea, is this going to be suitable for what you want to do, right? Okay. Often we're going to look at duplexing it, or, if it's an existing one, is it in good shape, or, here's certain things you need to look out for. and kind of offer accordingly, right? We have to be a little bit careful because we're not licensed real estate professionals, so the advice that you can give, there's a bit of a thin line there. But in general, we want to advise, just make sure people are getting the right place that's going to work, for what they're intending.
Yeah, so if you're using Joyhill as a property management company, and you want to have input on the purchase end, that's going to make the whole process smoother.
Yeah, and we always recommend get a property inspector out there to do that, and some of that's for liability as well. But I can look at a property and be like, you know what, I don't think this basement's wet. Right. So either don't buy it or buy it knowing that you're going to have to do a lot of work, right? Just some things like that, especially because we work with a lot of first-time home buyers or investors buying an investment property. So yeah, once they have the property, then we're going to, and assuming construction is done, if anything is needed, or if stuff's needed, we can hook them up with local contractors to get the work done. And then, then starts, assuming we're doing a short-term rental, then starts the process of getting it ready for listing. So there's typically some setup involved. You got to furnish the place, and we'll provide, a rough budget for that.
Yeah, that to me jumps out as the biggest difference between long-term and short-term is the furnishing or the expenses related to actually making this place habitable for tenants.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the painting and that kind of base layer stuff that has to be done. And there's even some, a lot of the same rules apply, right? You want to keep it neutral generally, so that it offends the least amount of people as possible, right? So when you're doing a short-term rental, it doesn't hurt to have some color in there. So maybe an accent wall or something that'll stand out, especially for pictures. But unless you're
designing to not offend, and we try to design to attract. Attracting certain people, you're just not offending the most amount of people.
Well, because with short-term rentals, you've got a lot of people coming in and out, right? Like why are hotels, always beige? Or traditionally anyways, but that was kind of the thought behind it, right? It doesn't stand out unless it's a higher end one, but it also doesn't offend you, and we see some Airbnbs that are very well done, and they may have hot pink and stuff, and they're themed. Yeah. And that can work, but you have to be really careful when you do that, because some people may love that, and then a lot of other people may just be too much. So we try to make sure it's tasteful, and there's a lot you can do with decor, right? Which isn't my strong suit. Kirsten normally kind of takes care of that, but I'm learning, right? So you kind of
you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be good at what you're good at.
You keep it neutral, and then you kind of use your decor as the accents, right? So whether it's your couches, furniture, artwork, that kind of thing. So I have a bit of a problem with auctions and buying artwork, and I love it, especially for some of the more the older places we have that have they're vintage or Victorian, right? There's lots of cool stuff you could get in auctions. So I'm always looking for, either antique books or paintings that we can throw in the listings. And it's pretty cool. But typically we will work with the client and just say either we can get everything, and that's fine, that's hands off, and we'll charge a fee for that, or here's a list of everything to get, and that's down to forks and toothpicks and everything you need for your kitchen. And that will vary according to the use. So if it's a short-term rental, there's certain amenities that Airbnb looks for that you might not consider putting in otherwise. And this is a method that some people use, is they just, that some hosts will use, is they really stack their amenities. So they will buy everything on the amenities list, like a rice cooker, a mosquito net, a kayak.
So these are Airbnb has a list of things that tenants are looking for, and you can say whether you have them or not. And then what does that do? Boost your listing, or makes it more attractive?
Yeah. So something like a mosquito net, we don't need mosquito nets here, but it's on the list for Airbnb because in some areas that's important. But once you kind of understand how the system works, that there's an algorithm that goes through all the listings, and it looks at a whole bunch of different things. But one of those is sort of completeness. So if you can tick off every single amenity, it looks like a really complete profile, and that will boost you in the listings when people are searching. So where you show up in that list of homes in the area.
Right. So this is something you guys are thinking about on behalf of the property owner or investor. Like they don't have to worry about their listing being boosted or where it sits.
Yeah, we take care of that. Yeah, there's certain things to do. Oh yeah, right. And there's certain things in the initial setup where
I'm sure I could watch a lot of YouTube videos to try to figure that out, but you've done it for me.
I watch a lot of YouTube videos and podcasts, but things you learn along the way. So in the example of a mosquito net, you would just throw it in the closet, right? And there's a line. Right? Like a hot tub is also nice, but are you going to, in the market that you're in, are you going to get the return on investment for a hot tub, right? So in a typical urban market like here, no, you're not getting it, or a swimming pool. They're nice to have, and they may help increase your bookings and what you can charge, but yeah, you have to, if I spend 10 grand on something, am I going to get that 10 grand back in additional bookings over the course of 2 years, if that's where we want to get our cash on cash returns. So a lot of things like that. So if it's a $50 item, let's get it, and we throw it in the closet, you never use it, at least you can say it's there. And if somebody does ask for it, you could be like, yep, it's in the closet, right? It may never come up, but and that's one little example of the things and some of the complexity that you have to consider when you're setting up an Airbnb, because it's not all intuitive, right? The intuitive stuff most people get, right? Make sure it's inviting, it's attractive, it's comfortable, your beds are comfortable, that it's clean. Cleanliness is huge, and we'll talk about that. But there's a lot of other things that you wouldn't really consider that seem kind of silly, like why would I buy a mosquito net? But it can potentially make a big difference, right? They're all incremental things, but when you add them all up, that's how you get your rankings up.
Maybe I need to hire you guys, because my wife and I moved out for a couple months. We're house sitting somewhere else, and we had a 3-month window, and we looked at Airbnb as an option, and we decided to go for it. And it was a big learning curve. We had good reviews, bad reviews, but it was a lot to take in just to get the house set up in the first place. But then I didn't even think of some of these things, like what do you need to actually do to get search results? And because there's a side of it of making the unit a place that you can live, and then there's the other side of it. You actually have to market that unit to people and attract them and get them to book your unit, and that's where you actually make money. And I guess that's maybe a bit of a snowball there, where people, if people book it, then you get a good review, and it just
it adds up, right? So you can, like any business, you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't market it, nobody's going to buy it. You might get a few people, friends and family, but
nobody knows it exists.
Yeah, and so it's kind of useless. You've spent all that money for nothing. So. And there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of kind of daily stuff that we do for our clients to make sure that we kind of stay up near the top of the rankings. You can't, there's some stuff that is not in your control, and some of it will depend on the actual property and maybe the size of it, and that's where we try and advise people. But sometimes we're working with a property that they already have, and they're not going to sell it and buy something better. They just want to, and maybe they want to hang on to it because they're leaving the country for a while and they're going to come back. So we're just going to make the best of what we have there, and try and get it booked. But that's getting the bookings. So there's a couple things you need to do. One is get the ranking up. How do you do that? But the goal is A, to get clicks on your listing, and then B, which is the real goal, is to get bookings. But those aren't always the same. There's different things you'll do to get clicks versus to get the bookings, right? To get the bookings, you have to have the goods, and once people are, no, you don't lower the price. Don't lower the price, okay? number one lesson, don't lower the price. Sometimes you have to, but what gets a booking isn't always what gets a click.
Right.
Right. And there's a lot that kind of goes into that as well. But, so pictures is a big one. And
like the photos on the listing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I'm
Is
a
that
little
something
bit,
you guys handle as well?
no, we'll get some, so I'm a little bit torn on that.
Okay.
Because there's a line with the property. So if you have, like we encourage people, let's get professional photos and, that may cost you a couple $100, but generally worth it. But you have to make sure that your photos match reality.
Right.
Because if you have a beautiful place, beautiful cottage, get all the sunset pictures and the lake and the whatever else, because when people come there, they will experience that.
Yeah.
And it's probably even better in real life. But you can have the case where your pictures are better than what the place actually is. And I've seen this a lot and even experienced it when I've booked Airbnbs and stayed at them. You get there and you're like, oh, this place is kind of a dump.
It's right beside a hydro line.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're not taking pictures of the moldy baseboards or those kind of things. Right. So you can oversell your property and, you might say, what's the problem with that? Like, it's marketing. That's what I want to do, right? The problem is you're going to get worse reviews than if you had more mediocre pictures. So we don't always push
the customer's expectations way up here. He comes in and he sees.
Yeah. Whereas if you manage those expectations, because we have some properties that aren't the greatest and the best, but we'll present it kind of the way it is and have the information in the listing, like whatever warts might exist with that listing, so that when people go there, they know exactly what they're going to get.
Okay, and so that makes sense. So you talked a little bit about short-term rentals, and I know you wrote this book, You, Me, and Airbnb, The Savvy Couple's Guide to Turning Midterm Rentals into Big-Time Profits. So you and your wife, Kirsten, wrote this recently, and this is about midterm rentals. So that to me is something that's kind of new on the scene, and I haven't learned too much about it, but how does that differentiate from short-term? Like, what sorts of things would you do differently from just a regular Airbnb when you're looking at specifically midterm? Like, what are the advantages of that? And can you talk about it?
Yeah, for sure. So the one advantage, if you're self-managing, is that it's way less work. It is less revenue, midterm compared to short-term. But depending on, what stage of life you're in or how busy you are, if you want to hire someone to manage it or not, it's a lot less work. So especially if it's more work than a long-term rental. So going from a long-term to a midterm might still seem like, oh, it's more work, right? But that is the one big advantage if you're self-managing. Another one is that it tends to be more stable. So again, not as much revenue, but it's more stable revenue. And for us coming from short-term rentals and getting into midterm, we're like, wow, this is awesome, because I can predict my cash flow for the next, not for the next year, until you have kind of a baseline of what demand is in your area. But I know for the next 3 months or 6 months, I'm getting X amount of money. And that takes a little bit of the stress off with when you're doing Airbnb and you're not sure what's happening, especially when it's a slower time, right? You get to know kind of the seasonality of your market. So we know that January to March in Hamilton is typically slower for short-term rentals. Right? There's not as many people doing touristy kind of stuff or visiting right after Christmas.
Yeah.
So midterm rentals are perfect for that. So often we'll do kind of a hybrid strategy. Now that's probably come to an end in Hamilton anyways with the recent regulations. We'll see how that goes, but they've restricted short-term rentals to basically principal residence only. So if you're an investor and you've got a second property in Hamilton, you won't be able to use that as a short-term rental. You won't be able to get a license as a short-term rental. And those that, even in your principal residence, you've got to get a license, fire inspection, all that stuff. But getting back to the midterm, so these are stays of 30 days or longer. And this is a different audience a different target market than a short-term rental.
Say, like, who's looking for that sort of rental, like 30 days?
Yeah.
If someone's actually going to be moving, I would assume they would go long-term. But like, why would somebody choose mid-term?
Yeah.
Who are these people?
So in short-term, you're relying a lot on tourists or people in town for different reasons, maybe for work, for like a very short, like a couple of days kind of thing. Conferences. So you're getting people who may have stayed in hotels previously. And like, our family's a good example. If we travel, we're going to stay in an Airbnb. And I'm going to find a place that has Airbnbs. And if it doesn't, I'm probably not going to go to that place.
Out of spite.
No, well, not out of spite, but I don't want to bring 4 little kids and us into a hotel. And often, we may have another person with us too, or the wife's parents, for example. So like we've done it, but it's just, I hate it, right? I'd rather have a house where we can go and chill and make our own meals. And we have like,
you're not being disruptive to other people necessarily.
I hadn't thought of that, but that's true. My children are quite disruptive. But no, you've got a living room or a toy room or whatever. There's just more room and more amenities to deal with stuff. So anyways, so you'll get people like that traveling for, just traveling. Hamilton is actually a decent tourist destination because we're in the middle of Niagara Falls in Toronto.
Right.
And so like anybody who's listening, think about what's around you, because that may not have occurred to you. It never occurred to us that Hamilton would be a tourist destination.
Yeah, on a global perspective, why would somebody come to your city?
Well, yeah. But there may be something you're not
if
thinking
it's within driving distance to a major site, then
yeah, especially like national parks in the States, right? Which is kind of underserved. But anyways, so those are the kind of folks you're getting for short-term rentals and even like hospital stays, that kind of thing. So I'm getting to the midterm. I'm getting there. But in terms of vetting your guests as well, there's a little bit of a difference, right? With short-term stays, we want to avoid people who are local. And there's kind of 3 things that like the unholy trinity of short-term stays, which is someone who's local, someone who books last minute, and who books for one night. If you have all 3 of those things, do not do that rental because it's always, maybe not always, but 99% of the time, it's going to result in a problem because that's either somebody who's looking to have a party, looking to do drugs, or is involved in sex work. Right. And like, you don't want any of those things in your property. So one way to get around that is just to have like a 3-night minimum, and that weeds out most of it. And then you can kind of, if it's a 3-night minimum and it's last minute, but they're not local, that's usually okay. If it's a 3-night minimum and they're local, but it's not last minute, right? You can ask them like, why you want to stay here. Yeah. So you do a little bit of vetting. So that's the short-term side. On the midterm side, it's a totally different clientele. So local is good. Local's fine. But what you really want is homeowners. For the most part, that's kind of the biggest market. So you'll be getting people who are doing renovations or who have sold their house and the closing dates don't match up between their sale and the new purchase. So we've had lots of people come in for a couple months doing renos or between houses, right? So they've got the disposable income, whether that's the line of credit that they're using to fund their renovation, or they've sold a house, they made some money. So they have money. So that's important too. You want people who've got some disposable income that are comfortable to pay the rate for a midterm rental. So a midterm rental is not going to be as much as a short-term rental, right? The same cost for a month, let's say, but it's going to be more than a long-term rental. So it could be up to double the cost of a long-term rental, right? Depending on the market and where things are at, but 50 to 100% the rates of a long-term rental. Whereas Airbnb could be 100 to 200%, or, in this area anyways. Some areas can be a little bit different. But I'm talking about like an urban kind of market, not a strictly vacation rental. Yeah. Right. So that is a fair difference in rates, but you want someone who's able to put down that kind of cash to stay in your place for a little while. So that means they need to have the cash, they need to have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So they'll probably need a credit card that has that kind of a limit on the card to be able to pay that monthly, right? And like, yeah, that's not a huge hurdle, but it eliminates a lot of the folks that you don't want in there. So what you don't want is renters, people who are like between places, got kicked out of a place, need a place to stay, because they're not going to leave once you get them in.
Yeah.
Right. So you got to avoid that. So homeowners is a big one.
So is there a way, because I could see the situation where somebody gets out of their, or gets evicted from a place, and then they need a place to live, so they find a midterm rental or Airbnb listing, and they rent it for a couple months, and then they won't move on. So what do you do as a management company or an owner in that case? Like, is there recourse for you to get somebody out who is not paying, or how does that work?
So the traditional thinking is that once you're past 30 days, this is landlord-tenant board area, and you're stuck with them. They could be there for a year until you get your hearing. Not really the case, but there's a few things you want to do to set yourself up for success or to mitigate risk. So one of those is don't use a standard Ontario lease form, because that just reinforces that this is a regular lease. You want to keep it as a business transaction. So that means some different kind of lease. So something, and that could just be the Airbnb agreement, but something where you can show either police or sheriff or even landlord-tenant board, like, no, you actually don't have jurisdiction. This is a business transaction, the same as a short-term rental would be, because they don't have jurisdiction there. This is a business transaction, and if you have a business lease, that's very different than a residential lease in Ontario anyways, right? And in most places, right? So you can evict within 7 days on a business lease, and like with very little notice for any reason.
You still have to go to the landlord-tenant board to get
Well, so there's confusion about that because some people have done that, but technically no, right? You need to either have the police or the sheriff understand that this is a business transaction and actually they have jurisdiction. And like cops don't take Airbnb courses as part of the training. I don't think anyways, right? So you just have to be able to plead your case. But like you don't want to go down that road even, because just the potential for confusion. So that's where vetting your tenants, your guests, don't call them tenants because that just plays into that whole thing, makes a big difference. So that's why I said you don't want renters. And like you can interview people and you can ask them why they want to stay in your place. And I've talked to some people who actually like just dropped by the people's residence because they said, oh yeah, we're doing renovations, so we need a place to live. So they're like, okay, oh hey, I'm in the area. Could I just pop by and we'll chat or sign this thing? And they've gone and actually verified that, yep, they're doing renovations. Like, yeah, there's drywall dust, there's this, there's that, right? Wow. I don't usually go to that extreme, but you do a little bit of research, right? Find out. If you're doing a long-term rental, you're going to find out, like, you can call and verify their employment. You can verify their income.
Due diligence on everybody, right?
Yeah, so you're not going to you're not running credit checks, but you can do a lot of that same stuff to verify that their story checks out, because they could be with you for 3 to 6 months. So it's worth it to do that extra work up front and just make sure that they are who they say they are and they have a valid reason, not for wanting to stay, but for wanting to leave. You always want them to have a reason to leave. So another potential source of guests would be immigrants. And that's huge here, right? So someone who's got a bit of money and has immigrated to Canada and they don't really know, like they got on a plane and they got here, but do they want to live in Toronto? Do they want to live in Hamilton, Montreal? Like they don't know. So they may stay in Hamilton for a month or two. And like, any city, insert your city name here, right? And just kind of get their feet under them, figure out if they're what they want to do for work, start a business, just kind of get the lay of the land, right? So having somewhere to stay for a month or two is perfect for them.
Yeah, I can imagine like if you don't have any family connections or any church community or anything like that.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Where am I going to stay? Airbnbs.
And so that can be a little bit harder to verify, but again, you want to have a conversation with them, talk to them. And then kind of the last The last two categories, one would be workers, like people in town for a longer work project.
Okay.
And so that's important for direct bookings, especially, which if we have time, we'll get into. And then also people like with insurance claims. So their house burned down, the insurance adjuster is finding them a place to stay. But all of these people have reasons to leave.
You got a short list of insurance adjusters.
I'm working on it. But that is an interesting point because with short-term rentals, you don't want to just rely on Airbnb, for example. You want to work on direct bookings. And there's a lot more people talking about that and doing education about that. But also for midterm rentals, that's quite important as well, is having a network or building a network of people that you can find for midterm rentals. Because of all the people that I've listed, they may not be on Airbnb looking for a place, right? They may have someone else looking for them or trying to do word of mouth or whatever, because people still don't really understand that midterm rentals are even a thing, right? A lot of people are like, oh, you can rent a place for 2 months? Like, that's cool. Right? I didn't know that. And I can get a furnished place for 3 months? Like, okay, yeah. And specifically for the reasons that I mentioned, right? Why people might need a rental.
Right.
Because they're not, that's not in their frame of mind, right? You don't do a reno every year, so you don't need a place every year for that purpose.
So you would have a network of people or a system to be able to drive direct bookings. And does that basically goes around Airbnb and their fees? Is that the idea and the advantage for the investor? Like,
well, there's two advantages, right? One, if you're doing short-term rentals in an urban setting or even midterm rentals, you may not have a lot of repeat guests, like one-offs. On the corporate side, you might with the company. So that's where it's important to build that. But for short-term rentals, people will talk about email marketing, and especially if you have a vacation rental like a cottage, capturing the email addresses or contact info of the people that are staying there so that you can market to them year-round. Right? Not be annoying, but send them a quarterly update or whatever. So they're like, oh yeah, I like that cottage. We should go there again next year. Right? And that so there's two things that does is it. You're not paying the Airbnb 15% marketing, their cut, which we're happy to pay because that's marketing and that gets you a guest, fine. But if you don't have to pay it, then don't, right?
Yeah.
But it also just helps secure your future bookings and just your because it's a business, right?
It's another layer of listing or another layer of guests.
Yeah, that you're not relying on Airbnb or somebody else to do, because Airbnb is going to act in Airbnb's own interest.
Right. So
that's not always aligned.
Or something like that.
Yeah, or if they'll change policies all the time that just irritate hosts to no end. And just go on Facebook, you'll find people complaining about them all the time. It's like, well, on one hand, yeah, that irritates me. But on the other hand, I want to also know that I have a partner that's going to stay around. And that means they need to make business decisions that ensure that they stay around. And that doesn't always align with what I want. Right. So it's, there's a bit of play there. But yeah, so with direct bookings, you're saving those fees, although sometimes you're incurring your own fees for your own marketing, right? And website and things like that, whatever you have to do to get those guests. But you eliminate the fees and then just kind of secure your own future bookings.
Yeah,
so
it seems like you have a little bit more control over that, right?
Yeah. So you may not be collecting email addresses and all the contact info for everybody that comes to a midterm rental, because again, somebody doing a reno, chances of them doing another reno in next year, pretty slim, right? During the pandemic, maybe. But, so getting that kind of information is as critical.
Doing a reno every year, you got to teach them a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, is there another layer to what you guys do? So you manage the property in the sense that you take care of the day-to-day, making sure that things not falling apart. Then you also take care of, first of all, you take care of getting the right property in the first place and setting it up. But furnishing it, are you going in and cleaning this thing and doing the laundry, that sort of stuff? How do you manage that whole process? I'm assuming you've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of balls in the air to juggle.
Yeah, a little bit of juggling. So again, with midterm, not as much cleaning, right? We will offer cleaning to people if they want it, but typically if you get the right person, they're responsible and they're going to do their own cleaning.
Right.
We've even had people
after they're gone.
Yeah.
Not
before and after.
Yeah, okay.
Right. We'll offer cleaning as a service, but typically people won't do that. But yeah, cleaning is just, I can't stress it enough. Making sure your place is clean, whether it's a shorter or midterm rental, is just critical, and especially for reviews, right? If you're using a online travel agency or OTA like Airbnb, Booking.com and VRBO are sort of the other ones in this area.
Okay.
But yeah, cleaning is very critical. But yeah, so the other things we'll do is, we'll organize the cleaning. So we don't do the cleaning anymore unless it's like something happened and all our cleaners are busy or not available, right? But this was a source of frustration for us, I guess, for years, running our own listings, right? We had 3 listings and had to do the laundry for each of them and the cleaning.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And when I say we, really, I just mean Kirsten. But
a
like,
bit too steep of a learning curve for you.
what's this laundry machine?
Yeah.
What are all these buttons? That I just rubbed it on this washboard. But no, like even just doing 3 short-term rental listings, ton of work, a ton. So eventually I convinced Kirsten, like, get some help, get someone else to clean, right? Like the cleaning is one thing, but doing the laundry, that's huge, right? If you got 2-3 beds times 2-3 listings, you're doing laundry all the time.
Right.
So, and there's things you can do to mitigate that. But yeah, so that's one thing we do is organized cleaning. We don't do it ourselves. We have cleaners, and they will come in and do the cleaning, and that's passed on to the guest as a cleaning fee. And then we do all the guest interactions as well. So when people inquire about a property, we need to respond. And, there's things you can do with like auto responses and a lot of automated messaging that helps get probably 80% of the messaging done automatically. Right. And you can do it. And most people don't realize that it's an automated message, which is, whatever, that's cool. Right. And then there's stuff in between where you need to be quick with your snappy with your responses. Because that's another thing too. Your response time is measured on Airbnb. So if you don't get back to people relatively quickly, that's measured in your metrics and doesn't reflect well on you.
I see. Okay, so you take care of that as well.
Yeah, basically, like the homeowner is not dealing with customers at all unless we're doing a co-hosting thing where we're sort of in the background watching what they're doing. But yeah, typically no. So cleaning, any repairs in between visits, right? Little things, we try and keep them up. And this is why most Airbnbs are in better shape than long-term rentals. Right. Because you're always upgrading stuff, right?
Go in there every time.
Yeah. And you're making sure the landscaping's done, right? Typically we'll have someone do the snow or the grass, make sure that's all up to par. So organize that kind of thing, make sure. Some of them will pay some of the utility bills. We encourage homeowners to take care of that, but some of them will manage all that. If the owner is out of country, then we'll need to do tax remittances. So there's some specific rules about tax that's important to know and to abide by, so that you don't get hit with a big tax bill at the end of the year. So we'll make sure those remittances are done to the CRA. And then just kind of monitoring the listing, right? There's a lot of work behind the scenes where, like every day, I'm looking at the rankings of our properties. Where are we, right? And if we're falling, like why? And what can I do to improve it? Because we always want to be on the top, 1 or 2 pages of Airbnb, especially when it's slow, right? If it's busier, you may be on page 5, 6, 7, and you're still going to get bookings. Yeah. But when it's slow, like it is now, and there's been, a massive increase in the number of Airbnb hosts across North America, but especially in our area. So there's a lot more competition. So what can we do to make sure we stay up in the rankings, right? Yeah. So there's, and like
you said, don't lower the price, but what's the rationale behind the pricing side of it? That's something you guys handle.
Yeah. So the price should be the last thing that you adjust lower, right, if you're having issues with bookings, right? So again, understanding what the Airbnb, and I always talk about Airbnb, like Booking.com and Vrbo exist as well. Very few listings from them. So we really, and Airbnb is the biggest OTA. So we really concentrate on that. And there's the most information and tools available for Airbnb. So you have to understand what the algorithm is looking for. And that's not always evident, and we don't always know either, right? Because there are changes roughly every 2 weeks to what Airbnb actually, how their algorithm works. And then once in a while they'll do it, like you kind of keep up to them, but once in a while they'll do a big one. They did one recently where nobody really knows or has figured out exactly what the algorithm's looking for now. So people are trying all kinds of, like, get rid of your cleaning fees, lower the prices, do this, do that, right? So there's usually a few things that that if you do correctly, you'll do okay. So one of them is having like a complete profile. Complete, right, in air quotes. So that means your pictures, even if they're not the greatest quality, are bigger, and there's lots of them. Right. You are checking in on your profile. If you can do it daily, do it daily. And there's ways to do that. But like you're involved, and you're an involved host basically, right? But you have all your amenities checked off, for example, or as many as you can. Airbnb loves to add amenities, so you got to check in frequently to see, like, oh, they added doggy bed or something, right?
Yeah.
Do I have that? And sometimes amenities just disappear off your listing, so you got to go back in and be like, yes, I have a smart TV.
You're saying all this stuff, and I'm going like, yeah, this is a lot of work. I'm falling asleep on you now. That makes total sense that, we want to boost listings, we want to get money. Want to basically make the price the last thing that we adjust. Okay, so I got that. So you guys focus on midterm rentals. Maybe you do some short-term rentals to fill the gaps. You steer away from long-term rentals just because of your service, the way it works. What do people do to get in contact with you to learn more about what you actually do? I don't know. You could probably talk to me forever, but if somebody has a property and they want to know if it works, or like, do they call you if they're looking for a property? Like, how do they start? How do they get started?
Yeah, if you're thinking about doing short-term rentals in this area or anywhere, I guess, just give us a call, right? Talking is free, usually, up to a point. But no, like I talk with a lot of people, and
you like to talk.
I don't mind talking. Yeah. Beats working, that's for sure. But no, I'm in conversations with a lot of people, and just like maybe monthly or something, where they're like, hey, I read the book or heard about you, and this is what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? I'd be like, yes, no, whatever. Here's things to look out for. And then a month later, we'll have another call, and they're like, oh yeah, that property didn't work out. Here's another one. So we can do like a market analysis, whether it's in our area or somewhere else. And just talk. And sometimes people just need a little bit of help for their own listing, their own management. I'm happy to provide that, because like education, I think, is important. And education should be free.
Yeah, some of the time, to me, it's once you know all of these things, you know the value of them, and you know how much work it is. And if you're not cut out for that, but you still want to have the benefits of renting your place on Airbnb and getting the benefits of having a higher cash flow, or some of these different things of, having the opportunity to fix your property up more frequently, not being governed by the landlord-tenant board. I see a lot of advantages to it, so I know who to
Yeah, and from a business perspective, like you're saying, well, you spend all this time talking to people, that's dumb. Like, really, it's not, because like yourself, I can get into it, and some people will just be like, yep, I want to learn everything you're going to teach me, and read the book, I'll send you additional stuff, and they'll do it, and I'm happy for them. Other people will be like, that's way too much. Like, I can't do this. You do it for me. Yeah. So there's a ratio there. And I guess that's part of marketing, right? When it comes right down to it. So it's, if you're thinking of calling us and wasting my time, like, go ahead. It's worth it to us.
All right. Well, I got to wrap this up. Everyone go check out the book, You, Me, and Airbnb. Mark and Kirsten Krikke, the savvy couple's guide to turning midterm rentals into big-time profits. Thank you, Mark, and we'll see you guys next time on the Two Stewards podcast.
Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
And if you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We'll see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.